G'day gamers, Ranger Tony here with another Pathfinder Kingmaker video. Today I'm going to talk about the difficulty of the game. So this is going to be a bit more of a talky video without much in the way of gameplay, but I want to talk about the difficulty of Pathfinder Kingmaker and similar games and why it's perceived as being difficult. So a lot of people made quite vocal complaints when the game first came out, and probably still do, that the game is too hard. The first patch release of the game changed the first wandering monster encounter from wolves to thylacines as a result. A lot of the complaints were from people who had played Pathfinder as a pen and paper game, and they felt that the conversion to a computer-based role-playing game was too tough, and that you didn't get enough experience for some encounters. Now, while I do agree that the experience for some encounters and quests does seem very low, I don't feel that the game is too hard in general. When choosing the game difficulty, you can quickly see, based on the options, how hard the game is going to be. Even in normal mode, it could be considered challenging for some pen and paper gamers, depending on the various factors. What makes it all challenging is that when you build a computer-based role-playing game, you have to build in a consistent set of rules. The game can't make the decision to apply a rule or fudge a rule in any given situation, right? But in a pen and paper game, the DM can choose at any time to ignore the result of a dice roll or change an interpretation of a rule at any point. So while there are difficulty options that you can turn on or off here, they're a selective thing. They're either always on or always off. Okay? So in pen and paper games, the DM's job is to guide the players through a story and hopefully to enable everyone to have fun at the same time. As a result, some, if not most, DMs will take liberties with rules at certain points in the game to ensure the game goes smoothly and that they can tell the story that they want to tell. Computer-based role-playing games can't do that. There's still a story that they want to tell, but if they try and have it so that in this part of the game critical hits are ignored and in this part they're not, or to try and do things that say, well, if your hit points are below a certain level and an opponent does a critical hit on you, ignore it because it's going to kill them and we don't want to kill them. That sort of thing just doesn't work in a computer-based role-playing game. So the end result is some DMs who focus solely on role-playing and storytelling may not even make their games similar to... They might be more similar to using story mode in a game like this, rather than the default normal setting that we've got. It really comes down to the DM, the story that they're trying to tell, the level of the players, the experience they've got, a lot of different factors. So when we look at Pathfinder Kingmaker, we can see that there are several mechanisms of the game that can affect the difficulty. So let's have a look at these. The first, of course, is critical hits. Now, for a low-level character, a single critical hit can be the difference between life and death, even if that character is at full health. For this reason, whether they admit it or not, most DMs in pen and paper games will ignore opponents' critical hits against the players when they're at low levels, or if there's a chance that that critical hit is going to kill someone. The death of a player, particularly at low levels, can put a serious strain on a campaign. So here in Pathfinder Kingmaker, you can adjust critical hits. You can turn them off, you can set them to weak, or you can make them normal. This one factor in itself, this one option, changes the difficulty considerably, particularly at low levels. Okay. Death's Door is a classic way of ensuring that your player characters don't die. If you think about it, it's a double standard, because your opponents rarely, if ever, survive combat. And if they did, you would have to go around and dispatch all of your opponents after the battle was finished. Okay, so in the early days of D&D, 0 HP was dead. Full stop, game over. The mechanism to allow the player characters to survive for a limited amount of time with negative HP was designed to overcome this issue. In fact, it was probably designed by DMs who felt guilty for always having to fudge rolls to save the players, particularly at lower levels. The next option, Dead Companions Rise After Combat. This is purely a computer-based role-playing thing. It is not something that would ever really relate to a pen and paper game, except maybe if the DM was controlling some non-player character retainers. If you were playing a knight and you had some squires and men-at-arms that the DM was controlling, then the DM might choose after combat to revive them with little or no, consequences, because they're not as important as a main character. Removing negative effects on rest and party speed down here, depending on the weight you carry, these are the sort of things that we would normally consider in a pen and paper environment as homebrewing. These are house rules, custom rules that, or variations on the rules based on how the DM wants to interpret certain rules. In some ways it's a bit silly, because if you're talking about removing the negative effects on rest, for example, if you're a DM and you're creating an adventure and you know that this particular situation or opponent is going to grant a negative effect, could grant a negative effect to a PC, then by giving them the option to just rest and get over it, it's almost not worth it. You would be better off just not even bothering to put that in the campaign in the first place. This one is one of the ones that was a big thing for early players because of Pathfinder Kingmaker, because everyone went on about the spider swarms in the Fangberry Cave and how they are A, hard to kill because they're a swarm, and B, they permanently debuff strength. I'm not saying this option was added purely for that, but it's one of the reasons. Auto-leveling up is purely a concession for players who have never played before. This is not something that would really exist in the pen and paper world, because no player is ever going to allow the DM to level their characters. Having said that, the auto-level up option for companions is similar to what would happen if the DM, like I said before, was controlling some NPC characters. Enemy stat adjustments and enemy difficulty and damage to party, those are all further examples of the things that the DM might do on the sly without the player's direct knowledge. Let's say, for example, your DM has found a campaign that they really like, but it's designed for characters that are either of a higher level or a lower level from what your characters are. Then they can either wait for the characters to play some other campaign and get enough experience so that they can do the higher level campaign, or they might have to wait for all of the other characters to die so that you can start a new campaign and do this new one. Or they might just decide to adjust the campaign that they've got to make the enemies easier, reduce their numbers, and change the types of the enemies slightly so that it better fits the characters that you've got. And that's what those stats there allow you to do. But again, unlike what could be done in a pen and paper environment, these are hard-coded and set once. Unless you want to be changing your difficulty levels before each and every combat, these things are things that you're not going to change a lot, but they have a big effect. So when we put all of this stuff together, these options give you as the player the option to homebrew a little bit and decide how strict you want the rules applied. Even in normal mode, you could consider it a bit harder at lower levels than what you would normally expect because of the weak criticals and the normal enemy difficulty. The big difference between the pen and paper and the computer role-playing is that As I've said, in the pen and paper, the DM can apply the rules selectively in a per-situation basis, which is not really possible in a computer role-playing game. So what it comes down to is that what you can do when you're playing the game is, let's say you want to play on normal, but you're still finding it a little challenging. Just start making a few changes here and there. Change the critical hits to off. You might want to set dead companions rise after combat, or remove negative effects on rest. That way you feel better about not having changed the enemy difficulty, but you're still making things just that little bit easier. You're not having to worry about critical hits. You're not having to worry that your dead companions don't rise, and negative effects are going to be a lot less for you. You might even want to put the enemies back to 100% normal enemies, just to see how that goes. Little things like that will help you a lot. So now there's also a perception by some that if you're not playing on something above normal level, you're not a real gamer. However, I say that these games are meant to be fun. I don't find it fun when the game is literally making enemies insanely hard and do twice the normal damage. That's not fun for me. My advice, play at whatever difficulty level suits you. I do not play on story mode, but I do play on easy mode, particularly when I'm playing with a new character, a new class for the first time. And if I want something harder, I just stick with normal, or I go with a custom variation that gives me something that is challenging but not ridiculously hard. Remember, people, it's all about having fun. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.